All right, we are live. Welcome to the Week 5 postgame show for the Rhode Island Legacy Leagues. I'm Joey, and I'm joined by one analyst this week. It is the 4th of July. People are out doing stuff. Shane and I have nothing better to do than talk about Legacy Leagues. What's better than that? Shane, what's up?
Nothing. I'm excited, not doing much, but who doesn't love talking some Legacy Leagues basketball?
Yeah, for sure. And we had some good games this week. We're going to have more good games in Week 6. We're going to get to the Week 5 recap and preview Week 6 at the end. Let's start with some 4th of July stuff. So it is the holiday. Instead of saying most patriotic team that you would say, Shane, and I think I know your answer. I'll be surprised if you don't say the team who you interviewed this week. But what's the team that you think has been the most enthusiastic so far? There's actually a couple good options because teams are taking to Twitter to carry out that Legacy League's patriotism. But what team has stood out to you the most as far as enthusiasm through 5 games this season?
I don't know. I think the Boston Blazers. I don't know, maybe a little biased, from Mass, but no, I just think obviously it's talking to Corey Strickland. He just seems to be so excited and always pumping up his teammates. He called himself the troll of the Legacy Leagues after the game, which was really funny. We love that, but I just think he's really positive. Encouraging his teammates, and it's just nice, have some positivity. Sometimes a little trash talking, but which is funny and enjoyable. But it's cool to see, pumping up your teammates, being excited about the game because, that's what it's all about. Like, we're playing basketball. We love it. That's why we're in it. So it's cool to see passion.
For sure. You just set yourself up for a conversation with Shane Patrick this week about enthusiasm. He might have some words for you, but that was a transition to get us to that game of the week from last week. We previewed it as the game of the week. It turned out to be the best game from Week 5, Duyer's boys and Lob City. It does go to overtime. Duyer's boys made a huge run in that fourth quarter to force overtime, and we're going to pull up the stats in a second. They, played the free throw game, fouled, and were able to hit some clutch shots to get it to overtime, where Lob City was just too much. Victor Kashu Jr., Nuri Mahmoud, took over. Victor had a very Victor-esque game, 31 points, leading the team, but did a lot of other things as well, including his defense. Shane, what did Lob City do for much of the game? Maybe not so much in the fourth quarter, but then in that overtime to get the win against a very good Duyer's boys team that's playing very, very well.
Yeah, this game was crazy good. Really just, probably the best game I've seen so far. It was really exciting. Obviously Cody Crawford just, I don't know, didn't play a lot for Lob City, which, would hurt most teams, but they have so much talent with Nuri Mahmoud and Victor Kashu Jr., really balling out. I mean, hitting a bunch of threes, 7 for 10 from 3, which was just crazy. His defense too, he had a couple of insane blocks, just really crazy how high he can jump. But, Nuri Mahmoud just was really powerful down low. Duyer's boys, a lot of talent though, but I don't know. Lob City just has this championship DNA in them, and they can handle anything thrown at them. And Duyer's boys, I think they outscored Lob City to 20-9 in the fourth quarter, but Lob City able to overcome that and really dominate in overtime and end up coming away with the win. And Nuri Mahmoud, a couple big dunks at the end, silenced Shane Patrick a little bit, who was letting Lob City know what he thinks of their playing ability.
For sure, yeah. I caught the end of this game, and that crowd as well. That it turned into the primetime game with all the people watching, and then the fourth quarter stuff that ended up happening. Crazy good game. Obviously, both teams are going to be looking to play again in the playoffs, and so hopefully we do get that. Let's transition to another close game that the Goodfellas did have a chance to win. In the final seconds, but it is the Ozone boys who were able to win 73-70 over the Goodfellas. And we're going to pull up the box score here in a second. You said you haven't seen much of the Goodfellas, but the Ozone boys now have won 3 straight games.
Yeah, obviously a young team, a new team to the Legacy Leagues, but it looks like they're finally starting to figure it out and really, gain experience. The Hogan brothers have just been so good, especially Patrick Hogan. I mean, 26 points leading the way again, but the Goodfellas, just going back, it was back and forth all game long, but, the Ozone boys, like I said, they seem to be figuring it out going along, and that's what this is all about, gaining experience and figuring it out. But, the Goodfellas, they were missing their coach, so that was a bit difficult, but, MJ Nerdarani not having the game that he usually has, so bit unfortunate for them. I think they would have looked at that game as a game they should have won and could have won. So we'll see how they go going forward.
Yeah, and it was the Goodfellas starting with 4 guys and then having some subs show up after that first quarter. MJ did play well for coming late and trying to jump into the game. And the Ozone boys, they're the whole time. They have their full team and are clicking. They like to look over at me, and because I'm not their biggest fan. And it's not that, I mean, they played great. They're playing good team ball, and they do have a bunch of guys who can dunk. But the Ozone boys, I think we can look at their last 3 wins, and we'll talk about that after. But they haven't beaten, there's tiers. They haven't beaten any of the top tier teams yet. So, I mean, wins are wins. Ultimately, you can't control who you play and who ends up being good or bad in this league. But, when they do get that challenge, that's what it's going to come down to. Beating one of those top 4, 5, 6 teams, the veteran teams, to kind of prove themselves. One of those teams that improved to 4-1 this week was the Boston Blazers. They hold off the Shady Dunkers 94-89, a game that the Shady Dunkers almost were able to come back. They had their 2 guys playing very well, but, we talked about Corey Strickland before. The Blazers ultimately did enough to win, but they almost made it very, very interesting there at the end.
Yeah, a guy in the crowd at halftime was like to the Shady Dunkers, you guys are only down 20. And I'm like, what's he saying? Like, he's crazy. Like, there's no way they can come back. Obviously, I was wrong. Shady Dunkers have looked really good. The addition of Aaron Gray and then Kenzie Marte, that 1-2 combo is just so hard to stop. I mean, Aaron Gray, I want to see him and Jose Mercado go head-to-head in the dunk contest because that's going to be an interesting one. But, I mean, Boston Blazers, they do have that good mixture of, size and speed. So I think that really is what carried them. They have a bit more talent than the Shady Dunkers. I think they have Kenzie Marte and Aaron Gray, and that's kind of it. If their other players can step up, I think, and if there was possibly a bit more time in the game, they could have, ended up winning that game. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go because Aaron Gray and Kenzie Marte together is a really good combination. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go forward.
Yeah, and as I come back on camera here, so Kenzie Marte, had some comments after they beat the Basket Hounds, and I wasn't saying anything bad. They were just celebrating like it was an impressive win over the Basket Hounds, and wins are wins. So they did what they were supposed to do last week. This week was a perfect example, and I didn't really want to say it during the game, and I got caught up before the game, but this was a perfect example for the Shady Dunkers to get this win, just like we talked about with the Ozone boys, right? This was their chance to beat one of those teams that we consider to be in that top tier. They almost did it, and just like you talked about, they needed another player or 2 to step up. There were plenty of times where the Blazers were able to kind of double team the big 2 on the Shady Dunkers and leave other guys open for shots. They weren't able to hit them. Now, whether they can hit them going forward is going to be the key. But in this game, it was really just the 2 of them against the entire Blazers team. And they almost pulled it off, hitting threes down the stretch, but were not able to come all the way back. Let's do, I guess the halfway crooks is going to have to be next. 67-47, the first win over the Stampede. It was a huge second half. It was a 35-16 second half for the halfway crooks. And, Shane, I know you're on the other court, but, the halfway crooks had 5 guys tonight. A big, always big for that.
Huge.
Against the Stampede team that also had 5 guys, but no John Peterson, which has been key for them.
Yeah, so halfway crooks finally getting a win, took a while, but, I never thought their record was kind of reflective of how talented they were. They just never had enough guys. They're always missing one more player. And so I think that was a big win for them, even with the Stampede not having John Peterson, who hasn't played the past 2 weeks. But, always a good performance, always good to finally get that first win under your belt. So, going forward, I think that's going to be big for them. And hopefully if the halfway crooks can, actually have a few more players, maybe give a guys a couple breaks here and there. I think, it's going to be good. I don't know how their schedule is going forward, but it could be, help their record or hurt their, depending on who they are playing going forward. And, if the Stampede can get John Peterson back in the lineup, that will definitely be beneficial for them.
Yeah, and so Jared Hansen returns next week, which will be nice. That'll even add some more depth. And, Jared's the point guard, so that's good to have him back. And it was a third quarter run, so it was a 1-point game at halftime. The Stampede were hanging in. And then Zach Marikis hit a three. I hit a couple threes out of halftime and kind of opened that lead up. And then we really never looked back. And so, yeah, Dylan Lincoln, Kevin McCartney's been good. He won't be there next week when we take on Island Time. So it'll be important to have Greg Bell and Dylan Lincoln next week against an Island Time team who is one of the bigger teams, but really has been unable to find a way to get a win. Island Time took on a very good team in Good U this week, one of our undefeated teams, and Good U remained undefeated. I believe it was, let's get this right. Again, another huge. So it's been kind of the second half, has been the tale of the season. And again, for Good U, they use a 22-5 third quarter to take down Island Time in the first game on court one. Shane kind of touching on Island Time a little bit. Obviously, we know Good U with that balanced scoring. What was Island Time unable to do that they are going to have to fix against the Crooks next week?
I don't know what it is about Island Time. I feel like they're inconsistent. They have good games and they have kind of slightly off games. You feel like they have the talent. I think Jeff Winchell, 9 points, he isn't a lot, but I just feel like he's such a good big just defensively. He has a lot of blocks. It's really hard to find someone who can match up with him, but I just think Good U's just a lot more talented. They're such a well-balanced team. So I don't know, Matt St. Hours, Ryan Palumbo, Brendan Degnan, Brad Van Fetchman, they don't have a weak link on the team. They're all just so talented. You're never you can kind of spot differences when on other teams, when players come in, you're like, oh, they're not as good as, some of the starters. But this team, you could argue that everyone could probably start. So I just think they're so well balanced. So it's going to be hard to beat them. But Island Time, I don't know. You kind of never know what you're going to get with them. So I think the halfway Crooks should beat them next week, but we're going to have to find out.
Yeah, and Good U does take on the Shady Dunkers next week, which has gotten a little more interesting recently, with how the Shady Dunkers are playing. So that'll be very interesting. We did those games. We're making moves. I think only one left. Two left. Cool. Bucket Chasers and Werewolves is where we'll go next. Werewolves, a new addition. So I'm interested to hear your feedback on, a 60 or 70% Brian Yarsey. Still not definitely 100%. I know he had some knee issues. So that may explain some of what you're about to say. But the Werewolves rode Brian Heston, who was hitting threes. And when he's doing that, that goes for Brian Heston over all of these Legacy League seasons. When Brian Heston's hitting threes, with the way he can drive, the way he can pass, the way he defends, when he adds on that shooting touch, he's almost unstoppable. Because you then have to get up on him and he can go right by you. Werewolves get the win, take down the Bucket Chasers. Again, Bucket Chasers almost made it close. But, the addition of Brian Yarsey, you can see some things starting to happen with this Werewolves team as they get the win in Week 5.
Yeah, I think Brian Yarsey, really good pickup for them, obviously, with Dave Campbell being injured. So just, a Yarsey and Brian Heston combination going forward could be really deadly for a lot of teams. Bucket Chasers kind of had a difficult time with them going forward. I mean, only Brian Heston, I just thought was just so incredible. Obviously 27 points, but just defense and rebounding was just so pivotal. I mean, 4 blocks, 6 steals. He was doing it all. He does it all for this team. So, I think the Werewolves kind of getting into it, Gino Forte, finally getting his shot to fall a little bit, had a couple nice dunks. So, if he can kind of get it going, Brian Yarsey getting a little bit more healthy, Robert Corsi looked pretty good. So I think going forward, this team could be really good. And then the Bucket Chasers, I don't know. Some games they look really good. Some games they don't. Kevin Figueiredo and then Enrique Goncalves, it's a great combination, but it's the pieces around them that need to really step up if this team wants to take the next step and, go to that next tier and match up with some of the upper level teams in the Legacy Leagues.
Yeah, and I'm going to get out of that really quick. So speaking of the Bucket Chasers, the last time they were in the league, Sergio Delambo and Henry Goncalves were there. They didn't really have anyone else, and it was those two. And those two were able to make some noise, kind of leading the way for this team. No Sergio this week, so that would have been interesting to have him there against a Werewolves team that's a little smaller, so he might have been able to have his way. But, the Bucket Chasers do have the pieces. They're going to have to figure it out and how to get the most out of that surrounding cast to kind of get into that next tier. We're going to touch on the tiers in a second, as we preview Week 6. But the last game, which we can touch on really quickly, Boom Shakalaka and the Basket Hounds. A dominant game by Boom Shakalaka, as every player on Boom Shakalaka recorded a triple double. They won by I'm bad at math. What's that? 97? Yeah, 98, something like that. Boom Shakalaka remains undefeated, but Jose Mercado again 62 points, and you can touch on this a little bit. But Boom Shakalaka does take on the Bucket Chasers next week, and we can kind of use this to segue into week 6 and what Boom has to do against the Bucket Chasers.
Yeah, Joe, you might want to consider a mercy rule. I don't know. You really should. Jose Mercado is just Boom. Boom is just so talented. I think the past few weeks they've only had 4 players, but they've just been able to handle the challenges. I mean, they handled Lob City with only 4 players, so the Basket Hounds wasn't really going to be a challenge for them. But I mean, I don't know. Boom just looks so good. Jose Mercado is just so hard to stop. Mark Belleville's been really good for them. So, he was a player of the week last week. So I just think it's so hard for teams to match up. I mean, how do you stop Jose Mercado has been the question, and nobody seems to have the answer. Obviously Lob City didn't have Victor Kashu Jr., so maybe that could have been a different look they could have given him. But honestly, I just think Boom is too much for most teams. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they handle. Obviously, it's going to be they're playing Good U near the end of the season, so that's kind of going to be, defining a lot of playoff seeding, especially with Good U also playing Lob City. So I just think, playoff seeding near the end is going to be, especially near the top of the bracket, is going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yep. And speaking of seeding, let's take a look at the standings. Let's see how fast I can make this work. We'll pull the standings right up for you guys. And we do have our 2 undefeated teams. There we go. And so I would say the tier, I guess there really is a top 4 right now. I would put Duyer's boys even at 2 and 3 in that top tier. So it's kind of like those 5, Good U, Boom Shakalaka, Boston Blazers, Lob City, and Duyer's boys. And that's kind of where they've been in the power rankings as well. That's, not power rankings don't go by record, right? So that's kind of how we do the tiers as well. Then that second tier, I think Ozone boys are in that second tier right now. Again, they can solidify their spot by beating one of the better teams. But Ozone boys, Werewolves, Bucket Chasers, Goodfellas when they're at full strength, and I would say halfway Crooks when they're at full strength would be in that second tier. I know that's a lot of teams. Then there's kind of a third tier with everyone else, maybe but the Basket Hounds, Shady Dunkers, Stampede. That's
Island
it.
Time.
Island Time. Yeah, I think they're all kind of near each other right now.
Yeah.
And again, beating a team in a different tier kind of brings you up in those power rankings, and that's kind of how we have it broken down by now. Thoughts really quick on that, Shane?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty spot on. I think, kind of starting to see teams separate themselves, and you really know who the top teams are. I would kind of say there's only 3 teams at the top. I like Good U, Boom, and Lob City. I think those are the top teams, those who everyone's chasing. I think, the Blazers and Werewolves, GA's boys, kind of that second tier, and then, Werewolves, Ozone boys, Bucket Chasers, kind of that other tier, and then you got like the Goodfellas, Stampede, Island Time, Shady Dunkers, Halfway Crooks, kind of close, and then Basket Hounds are kind of their own thing.
In their own thing right now.
Yeah.
Let's switch this over to the schedule. So there is our week 6 schedule. And to kind of put a bow on this post-game show, Shane, we kind of know what the game of the week is going to be. It's no surprise when you have a finals rematch. That is the game of the week, no matter what condition the team is in, especially with how close the Werewolves were last season to defeating Lob City. So that's our game of the week. Maybe even besides that one, what other matchup are you most looking forward to in week 6?
I'm gonna say, that's a good one. I'll say Boston Blazers and Ozone boys, just because obviously we're talking about the different tiers, and I want to see how the Ozone boys do against the more experienced teams. I don't know. Their wins have been okay the past few weeks, and obviously you can't knock a team for going on a win streak like theirs, but it's obviously they were a new team. You struggle a little bit in the beginning, and then you kind of figure it out. So now the schedule is giving you a test against the Boston Blazers, a more experienced team. So we're going to see how they handle that test. So I think that can kind of be a telling game and, really solidify how they're going to play going forward. But like you said, they are figuring it out. They're a young team. They're athletic. And obviously the Shady Dunkers were an athletic team, a young athletic team, and they kind of gave the Blazers challenges near the end of the game. So it's a test for both teams. So it's going to be interesting.
I just pulled up, and we'll leave it on you while I take a look at this. The Ozone Boys defeated the Goodfellas, Island Time, and the Shady Dunkers. So that's their 3 wins. I know we've alluded to that a lot, and they lost by 11 to the Werewolves and by 20 to Good U. And so, we kind of know Good U is now one of those better teams. So that's their wins. And Ozone, the remaining schedule is the Blazers, then the Basket Hounds, then Duyer's Boys and Bucket Chasers. So for them to start to get some of these wins, Duyer's Boys is a big one, and I think this Blazers one, just like you talked about, is also a big one for Ozone Boys if they want to kind of not only make a jump in the seeding, in the standings for the playoffs, but also in that conversation of tiers. Shane, very good job as always. This was the Week 5 postgame show. We broke everything down for you. We're going to get ready for that finals rematch in Week 6, and hopefully Yarcy's there to take on Lob City. That'll make it very interesting. Shane, thank you. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next week for Week 6.